Hello, I'm Dr. Jodie Richardson, and you're listening to Well, Hello Anxiety, a podcast where we end the struggle with anxiety and build our toolkit of practical skills to thrive. Anxiety is an emotion, and it's a specific type of emotion. It's a temporary feeling that signals that you're apprehensive about the uncertain future. In that uncertain future, yes, something bad could happen, but something good is also possible. And because it's oriented towards this uncertain future, it exists between where we are now and where we want to be. And in this space, there's hope and opportunity. And today's guest, who I've just paraphrased, is here to help us think differently about anxiety, appreciating it as a feature of being a human being, not a bug. It's with great pleasure that I welcome Tracy Dennis-Tiwary. Tracy Dennis-Tiwary PhD is a researcher, entrepreneur, professor of psychology and neuroscience, director of the Emotion Regulation Lab at the City University of New York, a regular media commentator, and author of the book Future Tense: Why Anxiety is Good for You, Even Though It Feels Bad. Tracy, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Jodie. I'm so happy to be with you.
Tracy, I've heard you say that anxiety has a PR problem. Tell us what you mean by that.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing that up. It's funny because it sounds a little flippant to say anxiety has a PR problem. But what I mean by that is that, like a good publicist, the story that one tells about something really shapes reality. And I believe that the story that we collectively are telling about anxiety, whether that's, a person just going about their life, whether that's a mental health professional, whether that's someone in the wellness space, I believe that we've started to tell the wrong story about anxiety, because it's a story in which anxiety is always a malfunction. It's our enemy, or it's like a cancer to eradicate. And the problem with that story, that bad PR, is that it actually primes us to do all the unhelpful things when it comes to actually working with and working through anxiety. It primes us to avoid and suppress anxiety. And we know that only makes anxiety stronger. So that's really what I mean by that. And then conversely, if we can tell a new story, and actually one that's very based in science, and acknowledging that anxiety, yes, there are anxiety disorders, but anxiety is still an emotion that we evolved to have to help us. If we can really wrap our heads around that complex reality, then we will be able to figure out more effectively how to live well with anxiety. And that's really why I talk about a PR problem.
And what you've said just makes perfect sense when we can step back, when we can get that perspective. But when we're in the midst, in the thick of that anxiety, and I know a lot of listeners to my podcast, and I overlooked mentioning in my introduction that Tracy is, of course, one of the co-hosts of Psychologists Off the Clock and was introduced to me by the beautiful Yael Schonbrun. So thank you to Yael for introducing us, and my apologies,
Yes,
Tracy. That's a big oversight.
No.
Yes, listeners to my podcast and to yours, of course, will be everywhere on that spectrum, won't they? From the everyday anxiety right through to anxiety disorders. And I know that you talk right across that spectrum. But could you help listeners who are thinking that makes sense from a rational point of view, but this thing that I'm living with, what I'm experiencing is so overwhelming and it feels like it's completely derailing me. What would you say to listeners who might be sort of thinking, I'd love to be able to have that perspective and have a mindset shift about it, but it feels too hard?
I so hear that perspective. And really, I've devoted my career, and I've been a psychologist for over 20 years, and I've devoted my career to really understanding anxiety disorders and emotional health and emotional illness. And so I know how incredibly hard it is to talk our way out of feelings. And so I am actually not suggesting that we somehow use our rationality and we will conquer this irrational emotion. It's really that when we shift our mindset, it's not going to happen overnight, but it's sort of like an optical illusion. right? So Rubens' vase, it's that famous optical illusion where it's black and white space, and the negative space, it's two people looking across a void at each other, right? And that void is shaped like a vase. So you can, with your eyes, you can flip in and out of, oh, wait, do I see two people in profile looking at each other, or do I see the vase? And mindsets are like that, so that once we can see something, whether it's an optical illusion or anxiety, in different ways, we all of a sudden will never be able to unsee it. Like you can never not see the vase in the faces. And to change our mindset, it is the first necessary step to start changing our relationship to anxiety and to build new skills. And so, what I would say is that, yes, it's incredibly hard, but we can actually enact this mindset shift using a lot of the tools we already have at our disposal. And we can do it step by step. And we can know that building emotion and anxiety skills, so to speak, these skills in managing and working with anxiety is a lot like building muscles and strength. It's like going to the gym every day. It's an emotional fitness. But again, the first step, just like getting to the gym every day, is your mindset needs to be there. I mean, I'm not so good at going to the gym every day, but I turned 50 this year, actually.
Happy
And it was
birthday.
a big, it was a big transition for me. And I actually have become more active than I ever have in my life because my mindset about what I needed to do to build my strength and my wellness has shifted. And when we think about anxiety as a normal part of being human, even if it's messy, even if it's hard, all of a sudden we stop judging ourselves so much. We stop avoiding it so much. We stop believing that we're broken, feeling that
Yes.
shame.
Yeah.
This shift towards knowing that anxiety could be an ally, even if we don't, or like even a friend, but probably a friend that we don't like being around that much because they always tell us the truth. You know what I mean? It's like, but when we shift, all of a sudden we can negotiate with this ally. But if anxiety is a cancer or is an enemy, there's no negotiation. There's just nothing you can do. And that was a long-winded way of saying the very first step in making positive change is to start playing with, being curious about this new mindset. And then a
Yes.
lot of what I talk about in my book, and I'll pause after I just lay out this framework, but just to say a lot of what I talk about in my book is how we can, as we kind of think about and maybe buy into this mindset, we can start to enact it and strengthen it by the choices we make in our life. And we can describe those choices as listening to anxiety, finding ways to leverage and use it productively, and then letting go of it in a flexible way. So those actions and choices and practices are working in conjunction with, synergistically with the mindset shift.
With the three L's that you've just shared with us, I love that you've broken it down into three concise messages that are memorable because sometimes when anxiety is starting to bubble up, it can be tricky, can't it, to tap into what it is that we'd like to do differently, especially when we're making change. And the first one is about listening and about anxiety being information. I'd really love to expand on each of these one by one. If we could start with the first L, which is listening, that would be brilliant.
Thank you. Yes. And you know, I think the great thing about listening is that it reminds us that although anxiety disorders do exist, anxiety is an emotion. And this idea of listening to emotions as information is a very old idea. This really dates back to Darwin, who showed and argued that every emotion has two parts to it. It gives us information about our place in the world and our well being in relation to the world, and it gives us preparation to respond to that information. So, you know, something like anger is information that there's an obstacle in our way. There's something blocking us from what we want in life, right? And that can be an object or a thing, or it can be justice. It could be abstractions as well, but we have a blocked goal. That's the information. And so our body starts to activate, and our minds and our thoughts. And that is the preparation that emotions contain. So now we're prepared to act in the case of anger to overcome the obstacle. And so every emotion is this little packet of information and preparation. And so we've evolved, and because Darwin, this is Darwin we're talking about, all of these packets of information have an evolutionary advantage. They help us survive and thrive. And anxiety is the same way. Anxiety is an emotion that tells us that we are facing an uncertain future. And in that uncertain future, there's both peril and possibility of something wonderful or good, at least, or safe,
Yes.
right? So something that's positive and negative that we're gazing into our future and realizing. Now, because both the negative and the positive are still possible, that's why we don't feel despair. Because if you are just looking at the negative, which is what anxiety makes us feel like sometimes, you would give up. You'd say, no, I can't do anything. But anxiety actually contains within it this possibility of hope that, well, I had this really big job interview tomorrow, and I'm really anxious about it because I could bomb it. I could just be horrible. I won't know what to say. I'm not good enough. I'm an imposter. But when you're anxious, your mind is actually also telling you that if I prepare and I do my best, I could get the job. And that's what anxiety prepares you to navigate, kind of thread that needle between peril and hope. And so it activates us to do things like persist, to focus. It feels like fear because there is this sort of, this sympathetic nervous system fight flight activation. But fear is about present and certain danger, like a snake is about to bite me. There's nothing uncertain about it, about fear. And yeah, you're prepared to act and deal with that threat. But anxiety it's really at its heart uncertainty. So when we actually take a step back, and we've already had this mindset that anxiety might not be the enemy. And I'm feeling anxious about this job interview. And rather than just say, I'm going to get rid of anxiety, I'm just going to suppress it. I'm going to go, I don't know, take a drink of wine, or I'm going to do anything not to feel it. If instead we get curious and we say, okay, what is anxiety telling me in this moment about my job interview? Yeah, I guess I really want that job because I care, because you're only anxious when you care. That's one piece of information. Another is that, yeah, some bad things could happen. I could mess up. And then the hopeful part of it is, well, but I have a lot of skills I bring to the table. So maybe if I practice what I'm going to say, or make a list, or practice doing an interview with my partner or friend, I can prepare. I feel like I'm not quite prepared. So let me prepare a little bit more. So now anxiety, by listening to it, we realize maybe I have this opportunity to actually strengthen my chances of making my dreams come true and doing well in this job interview. So that's why not only is it crucial to listen to anxiety for the potential for that information, but it also helps us disrupt the tendency we have to avoid and suppress anxiety, which only serves to amplify and make anxiety grow stronger. It's just not a long-term or consistent effective strategy. And we know that from, decades of science and clinical practice.
I really appreciate the fact that you've landed on that last statement, in addition to how you've talked about it being a packet of information. Anxiety is information, enabling us to prepare for what challenge lays before us, and the fact that it shows up around what we care about. But this idea that when we do all of the things that sort of feel like the right thing to do, because anxiety does not feel good and the brain has detected a threat. And so we want to recoil, we want to retreat, we want to avoid, we want to say no or cancel. And yet, what you've just said is, I think, really worth just honing in on just for another moment. This idea that when we do all of that, it only makes it worse.
Yeah. And sometimes, hey, listen, I kind of like, okay, I'm going to go to bed early. I'm done. I know. I'm going to binge that Netflix tonight. Or, once in a while, yes, we give ourselves a break. Let's not be hard on ourselves. But if again and again, when we see anxiety, and the first thing we want to do is make it go away and destroy it like it's dangerous, that is not going to serve us. That will not advance us. And it won't give us the opportunity to actually sit up and pay attention, because that's why anxiety feels bad. It has to feel bad to do its job. Because we have to leave our comfortable present moment, our present awareness,
Yes.
and we have to make ourselves into these mental time travelers into the future. And it takes effort and energy. And so anxiety has to sort of pick us up by the scruff of our neck and be a little unpleasant to orient us. Now, it can also make us excited, because anxiety is on this spectrum where positive emotion also exists. I mean, anxiety can be that frisson of, oh, this thing is coming up, and oh, I feel butterflies, but it's also, there's a joy as well. So it feels uncomfortable. It doesn't always have to be panic. And so we have to also recognize those moments as anxiety speaking to us.
Yes, yes. So tell us about leveraging. Leveraging being this second, not so much step, but this second element to this three-part approach that we're talking about today.
Yeah. Leveraging is really this idea that once we listen to anxiety's information, it helps us actually understand not only what matters to us, but it focuses us on perhaps what we need to do to avert disaster and make the positive outcome into reality. So it's really about taking that information and making plans, taking an action. And now I'm not suggesting that people obsessively, so if they're anxious about something, they listen to it and then they get on a hamster wheel of, oh, I have to do this and do that and do that. No, I think what I'm really trying to say is that if you observe after listening to what anxiety is telling you and then making a plan, you will immediately observe that your anxiety goes down, because anxiety is information, tells us something when it rises, and
Yes.
then when it decreases, it's giving us information that we're on the right track. When I'm under stress, one of my recurring things is that I will wake up in the early morning hours, right?
Yes.
4 a.m. And there'll be these thoughts going through my head and these worries. And often, as we all know, when we wake up at 4 a.m. with feeling yucky, those can be a jumble of thoughts. We don't always know what's going on. I had this happen and not too long ago, and the worries really centered around my work and something that I'd really not taken responsibility for.
Yes.
I dropped some balls. I hadn't done what I should have done to really be a good colleague with another person. And it was there in the back of my mind. And in the early morning hours, it came to the top. And so when I was sitting there and really acknowledging that uncomfortable anxiety, the leveraging was at first just that I made a plan. And I said, okay, I dropped that ball. I need to pick it up. I need to take responsibility and apologize and have a conversation with this person. And as soon as I started thinking that and making a plan for how I would do it the next day, my body started to relax. I really got that feedback that this was how I leverage this information to take positive, productive action in my life. And honestly, if I had ignored anxiety, I might have just kept sweeping this under the rug and my work would have suffered. So in this instance, anxiety was really this incredible ally who was pointing me towards the North Star of what matters to me. Like these relationships and my integrity matter to me. And so anxiety helped me really wake up to that fact.
It really did. I mean, literally and figuratively.
At 4 a.m.
At 4 a.m. Thank you for sharing that personal example. And I know so many listeners will relate, and as do I. Like you say, it's something that we care about, and it's really important. And had you not taken that time and being able to sit in that discomfort of, like you say, just listening to what your anxiety was telling you, then no doubt you could have had days or weeks or, dare I say, months of sleepless nights. Because if something is important to us and it is our North, related to our North Star, to our values, to the things that matter most, then it kind of will keep coming back to us, won't it? And so it's really so powerful if we can adopt that mindset shift and be a little more willing or a lot more willing, depending on what's happening, to recognize that discomfort, like you said, is sort of bringing us out of that present moment kind of comfort that we could be in and helping us to see that there might be something that we can do.
Yeah, and I think that's right. I think that little steps, I truly believe in, and actually the science of habit change shows that they make a big difference. And anxiety is, when we get into spirals of anxiety, and I have certainly had personal experiences of anxiety getting to overwhelming levels. I have not in my life been diagnosed with an anxiety disorder, although as a teenager, I suffered from depression and I had a major depressive disorder. Anxiety, all of us have had those moments when anxiety just feels like it's so spiraling and it's gone so deep and so long that we can't unspool it. But that's a mistake. And that's part of, I think, our shame speaking and this sort of disease model of anxiety where we feel like, well, I have this out of control, I put that in air quotes, anxiety, which means it's like I have a disease like cancer. So something's broken in me. And I just really want to encourage people to consider that what science shows and what therapy really as clinically validated therapeutic approaches show, if we do see a therapist, is that unwinding these habits, you do it little by little. You don't do it overnight. And little by little, step by step is effective. And indeed, going to therapy for an anxiety disorder, it's completely in sync with everything we're talking about in terms of the steps that need to be taken. Because an anxiety disorder is not just having a lot of anxiety, as you very often discuss on your podcast. It's really that the ways we're coping with that anxiety are causing functional impairment. They're getting in our way. And a lot of that is about avoidance.
Yes.
So we're socially anxious and we stop going to work. We cut off from our friends. We fear public humiliation. We check out of life. And it's not the anxiety per se as these habits that are breaking our life, not us. So that's why with these little practices of I'm listening, I'm leveraging, I'm listening, I'm leveraging. Sometimes it'll work, sometimes it won't.
Yes.
But you will build that skill just like going to a gym and building strength in your muscles. You're going to lift maybe 5 pounds at first, but pretty soon you'll be lifting 50. So sometimes I'm concerned that the listening and leveraging in the context of really hard, anxious times may seem impossible, but it really is possible and we can do it little by little.
I love that you've referenced this idea that we're not broken when we have anxiety. I know that that was a belief that I held for a very long time. And it was while I was struggling with all of the signs and symptoms of anxiety with no understanding of what I was experiencing or why. I'd love for you to speak to that idea that I think I'm not alone in this idea that there's something wrong, I'm broken, and this shame that comes with that, and this feeling, I think, that when you think you're broken, that you feel like, well, there's nothing I can do if I'm broken. There's nothing that I can do.
Yeah. I think we psychologists many decades ago really shifted to a medical model of mental health and illness for many excellent reasons, such as, having there be credible acknowledgement that when we suffer from psychological challenges, it should be treated seriously. These deserve medical treatment. But because we modeled ourselves so closely on the medical world with a disease model where you have a disease caused by a bacteria or virus, or you have to destroy the cause. You have diabetes, you have something broken in how your body's working. And so this whole approach of treating our psychological and emotional selves, treating these experiences and struggles the same way we treat a medical illness, I think has led us to this feeling of being broken. It's just not accurate. Because having an experience of overwhelming anxiety or an anxiety disorder is not the same as having cancer. With cancer, you have no choice but to eradicate it. But we are never going to get rid of anxiety, nor should we, because we've evolved to be able to use it to navigate uncertainty and to thrive in the face of a mysterious world. And so I think a lot of this belief is predicated on just the language we use around mental health. So I think that's one piece of it. I think another piece of it is that when we can fully acknowledge that anxiety is an emotion that's healthy and normal, and then understand that anxiety disorders are a result of having a combination of experiences, biological risk factors, both the extrapersonal and the interpersonal, that sets us up to be able to cope well or not well with anxiety. That when we start saying, oh, actually, this is a problem of thinking or acting or deciding rather than a problem of something inside of us that won't change, it just completely changes both the hope we have, the integrity of our sense of self, right? I really think that thinking of emotional well-being as emotional fitness is just a better metaphor than the disease metaphor. Now, there are mental illnesses that are serious mental illnesses like schizophrenia, like bipolar disorder. And we know that a lot of that is so biologically determined that the disease model might be more appropriate for those serious mental illnesses. But a lot of anxiety disorders, a lot of major depressive disorder, a lot of other kinds of mental health challenges, we don't need to use that medical model. We don't need to say it's all biology and we just need to fix it or medicate it, because there's so much that we can do and should do that can allow us to live well with this normal part of being human, like anxiety. So it's just, but again, it's all of this mindset, it's our conversations, it's our language, and we need to shift that conversation, which is why I'm so grateful to be talking with you, because these conversations are really important.
They really are. And they do make a difference for people. And I know that you would be, with your podcast, you would probably be on the receiving end, as am I, of notes of thanks or just little snippets of how something that's been said on the podcast has made a difference or supported somebody through a difficult time. And I think the beauty of a podcast is that you can regularly learn from a person who has a different mindset about it, and you can start to sort of adopt that over time. It's reinforced, it's delivered in bite-sized chunks and in different ways, with different language, with different guests. And so, yeah, it's just really so powerful that we can have these conversations and really help people to think differently about it and to, as you said at the beginning, and as I've said before, change their relationship with it, because we can thrive with anxiety. And that's what I say about myself. And I know that there are a lot of people out there who are at all different places on the spectrum between normal everyday anxiety through to having a diagnosed anxiety disorder. But no matter where you are, you're certainly not broken, and there is much that you can do. And that's probably a really nice place to move on to this next and final phase of the 3 L's that we've been discussing. So can you tell us about the last L?
Yes, certainly. That last L is let go. So you listen, and it is sort of in an order. I think if it's most effective in an order, because you have to listen first before you can leverage that information. And then after you leverage it, we can't be in the future all the time, planning and acting and doing. We have to let go of that future tense, that future anxious orientation, and come back to the present and be flexible, because really mental health is not the absence of anxiety or emotional discomfort. It is the presence of flexibility.
Yes.
And so that letting go after we've worked with anxiety and through it, that's really the icing on the cake of mental well-being, I think. And so we let go so that we can come back to the present moment where we can replenish and rejuvenate. Now, it sounds hard, and it is. It's not just, whoops, I'm coming back in my time travel machine of my mind. But the great thing about letting go is that we already have so much language, and we have so many tools around letting go, tools at our fingertips. We know a lot about mindfulness already in society, which is a wonderful, I think, shift that's happened over the past couple decades, especially, where we know that mindfulness and meditation, it's about creating a space, right, between having an experience and reacting to it. And in that space, you can come back to the present and have a new perspective. For a lot of people, coming back to the present and letting go of anxiety involves physical activity. And it's really one of the greatest ways that we can ground ourselves. And I really want to talk also about having kind of physical wellness as the groundwork for healthy anxiety, because if we're not active, if we're too sedentary, maybe we're drinking too much, or maybe we take drugs, or maybe we're eating poorly, or maybe if our body is in a state of imbalance, anxiety is also going to rear its head. We're going to feel unwell. Our physiology won't be in balance. We won't be sleeping. So when we let go and come back to the present, we will have an opportunity to notice how to shore up the sort of physical foundation of our well-being as well, and including athletics and and exercise. And people love the arts as a way to come back to the present moment and find flow. And there was a beautiful book written by Dr. Keltner this past year called Awe. And he's a psychologist and scientist at UC Berkeley who studies awe and experiences of awe. from a scientific perspective. And he shows that we can find awe every day. I have had the great good fortune to visit your beautiful country, Australia, and there's so many awe-inspiring environments. But awe actually is most commonly found in our relationships with others. When we encounter the humility of another person, the generosity, the kindness, those are actually also awe-inspiring experiences. So we can find, and when we start to look for these ways of coming back to the present, we'll also, I think, connect more with one of our greatest assets, which is finding a sense of purpose in life. And that doesn't have to be changing the world purpose. It's just something that's kind of greater than yourself, right? That helps you focus on something that you enjoy, but also that's giving back to others. So that can be, I have the purpose of just wanting to cook a great meal for my family every week, or it could be changing the world, or it could be being, trying to contribute to a healthier environment. Whatever it is, that's another way of plugging into that purpose of bringing ourselves back to here's where I am and who I am and what really matters to me in life.
I love that you've referenced, is it Professor or is it Dr. Keltner?
Both.
Yeah, both. Ah, there you go.
Both in that case.
Both in that case. I love that you've referenced awe. And it's funny, actually, coincidental, I suppose, is a better way of putting it. I was presenting on a couple of days ago. It doesn't really matter what day it is.
They all run into each other sometimes.
Yes. Feels a bit that way lately. Yeah, this idea of awe. I was speaking to a group of teachers about anxiety and about their own personal mental health and well-being. And I was talking about awe because I had the pleasure of interviewing a researcher by the name of Jake Eagle, who talks about awe as being an antidote to anxiety. I've just recently come back from London. Goodness, when I was walking through London, you just walk a few hundred meters from where my brother lives and there's Tower Bridge, and it's just like double take and just this, wow. And so we often can think of awe as these big momentous experiences in front of the Niagara Falls or a very old castle or something that is momentous. But I love that you've brought us back to this idea through referencing Dr. and Professor Keltner's wonderful work. And I know that he does brilliant work through the Greater Good Science Centre, which is just awesome, isn't it? Awesome, is that word? That it can be through simply just the relationships that we have. And I found myself yesterday, our daughter loves to sing, and she was singing and I was just watching her and listening, and I didn't realize in that moment that I was experiencing a little moment of awe. And so we don't have to look outside of our homes and our workplaces. We can, absolutely, but it is available to us probably more often than we might realize.
Yeah. And isn't that a beautiful thing? And when you start to see that we can use something that is a part of our everyday lives, that is indeed a human gift, really part of one of the beautiful aspects of the human condition, and it's an antidote to anxiety, you start to see, maybe anxiety in all of its ugliness and difficulty can also orient us to seeking out those moments, to seeking out a greater sense of purpose, something greater than ourselves. And I feel sometimes that if humans did not evolve to have anxiety in this way, that's really so creative and imaginative, because to really be anxious, you have to imagine and simulate a future that has never happened before or has not happened yet.
Yes.
Right. So if I'm anxious about, I don't know, some future dystopia, or I'm a science fiction author, that is a human achievement that requires really the jewel in the crown of human evolution, which is our prefrontal cortex, which allows us to imagine. So anxiety wouldn't exist without our imagination. And without that drive to get out of our comfort zone, because nothing great ever happens in our comfort zone, we would never have built civilizations. We would never have built London. We would never have done these. So I just feel the beauty and the difficulty just they're really hand in glove. And unfortunately, that is the messy work of being a human being. And when we can embrace all of that, we will just be our best selves. And it's not easy, but we can do it.
It's not easy, but we can do it. We absolutely can. And the book that you've written, and I love the play on words that you've used in the title of this book. It's so clever. It's called Future Tense: Why Anxiety is Good for You, Even Though It Feels Bad. And I'd love to spend the last few minutes of our conversation talking about the book. Can you tell us about it, please?
Thank you. I have to tell you, it was a labor of love. I have been a scientist for a long time. So this was actually my first popular book where I really tried to translate and tell stories about the research I've been doing and some of the new ideas that I've had. And the funny thing about Future Tense, too, is that I got the publishing deal just literally 2 weeks before the pandemic shutdown. I'll say this quickly, but it's an anxiety story, which is why I'm bothering. But I wrote the book during the pandemic. I was kind of trying to get feedback from my publisher, but she's like, keep going, keep going. Wrote about 100 pages or so, and then sent it in. And they essentially said, oh, this is terrible. Yeah,
Oh,
this is. And I had to
no.
throw it out and start all over again. And I actually worked with a wonderful editor, Bill Tonelli. The genius of working with a wonderful editor like him is that I had to tell the story to Bill. And this is really about storytelling, right? It's a mindset. Like
Yes.
Future Tense is about shifting our mindset. And he said to me, he's like, Tracy, I know nothing about this topic, and I'm moderately intelligent. I mean, both of those are false. And he said, so explain it to me. And so I had to explain it. And I threw out all those pages. I started with a blank page.
Yeah.
Talk about anxiety. Talk about not knowing if I was up to it. But this is where I tried to practice what I preach, which is to use this future tense thinking to say, okay, there's this future of peril, of things totally falling apart, or of some new possibility. And each day I had to reevaluate what was my peril, what was my possibility. And anxiety and taking care of myself and knowing when to let go and listening and leveraging and doing all those things, it allowed me to, I think, write a book in collaboration and social connection with my editor and my supporters and my friends and family, which is our greatest antidote to anxiety, our social connection. I was able to write a book that was probably 10 times better than I ever would have before. So it was sort of an illustration of what I was trying to write about because I had to go through that process myself. And this idea of future tense thinking is really important to me too, because it is about envisioning our future. And when we envision, and a popular word these days is manifest, and I'll use it even though it's a little woohoo, but I love it because really what it's about is you're envisioning your future and you're able to hold all the possibilities, and that can be painful. But it's only when you do that that you can really picture and crystallize what you want your life to be. What is this world you want to create? A personal life you want to create, whatever it is you want to achieve or do or experience. Anxiety is our ally in that and helping us envision and keeping us on the straight and narrow. Not that we always have to be anxious through every step, but it does. It helps us keep that persistence and hope and focus. And I'll just end with saying in my journeys of talking with people about this book, one of the most beautiful and educational, inspirational experiences I had was that in explaining some of these ideas to someone, the person turned to me and said, I had started to think of myself as someone who struggles with anxiety. And I was feeling shame about that. And it also didn't fit with the person I thought I was. And I've really been struggling with this idea that I'm a person who struggles with anxiety. But now I've realized from what we're talking about that I'm actually a person who struggles with hope.
Oh, wow.
And that insight was so beautiful. And when we make that shift in our own lives, right? When we, instead of punishing ourselves or judging ourselves for feeling these negative, bad emotions, and I'm doing air quotes, it's like,
Yes.
yes, they're painful, but they're not bad. Instead of punishing ourselves for that, to realize that anxiety and hope go hand in hand, and that's the struggle. And we're struggling so that we can hope and do these things. I think that changes everything. And that's really why I wrote the book. That's really what I hope the message of the book is, whether it's, again, day-to-day anxiety, like you were mentioning, or someone who's struggling with anxiety disorders. I believe the message remains the same.
Yes. Oh, gosh, Tracy. Look, writing a book is so, I mean, like you said, talk about anxiety. It's a huge challenge for more than the reasons we predict when we say we're going to do it or decide that we want to do it. And it's such a personal journey. And the fact that it became a beautiful, although very challenging opportunity for you to walk the talk, which I know you do. I know we all do, but it's like case in point. Wow, like that's a really important story that you shared, and also a really good illustration that none of us are immune to this. We are all human. To be anxious is to be human. And what you've been able to share with us today is that vase in between those two faces, or the two faces either side of the vase, depending on what people see first, that once you see it, you can't unsee it. And if this is the first episode a listener has tuned into, then I think you've given them such a gift through your work, through who you are, and through the beautiful way that you explain what it is that you're learning. So I thank you so much for the incredible work that you do in this area, and for writing the book, and for sharing the way that you do online, on socials. There are lots of clips of Tracy's work on YouTube as well. And so where can people find you if they would like to check out your website linked through to you on Instagram or on Facebook? And where can they find the book as well?
Thank you. Yeah, I do have a personal website. It's drtracyphd.com, and my name is Tracy. And then mostly with social media, I'm on Instagram. Everyone tells me I should get on TikTok. I don't know. Sorry. I
hear you.
But I enjoy, I try to share a lot of tips and ideas on Instagram, and that would be Dr.Tracy PhD.
Oh, brilliant. And I'll put all the details in the show notes. And the book is available through Tracy's website or through all good booksellers. And are there any bad booksellers? I don't think so. I think we need to change that narrative.
So. Even Amazon.
Well, yes, actually, that's a rabbit hole, isn't it?
Too soon.
Yes, let's not speak too soon. Yes. Go to your local bookshop or through Tracy's website, please.
I love it when people request the book through their local bookshops. I mean, that's so beautiful to me. I mean, that's for me, it's a thrill if I go to a small bookshop and my book's there. So.
Yes, very, very special. Look, thank you again. Thank you again for joining us. And thank you, listeners. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the podcast. It really is just an absolute joy for me to create this for you. It's a gift to me to be able to meet people like Tracy and to bring their wisdom to you in a way that's really easily accessible. So thank you again for joining me, and I will be back with you again next week. And thanks again, Tracy, for joining me. Bye. Thank you so much for joining me for this week's episode. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and leave a review. To keep the conversation going, I'd love you to join me over on Instagram. You'll find me at Dr. Jodie Richardson. Also, if you'd like a copy of my free 5-day mini email course, Calm Your Anxious Brain, then jump over to my website, drjodirichardson.com, and you can sign up down the bottom. I've really enjoyed having your company. Thanks so much. See you next time.